Hello. Today we are going to be covering Module 8 from the Skillful Teacher book, and we're going to be taking a look at high expectations teaching and how important this is to how our students perform each and every day. So the phrase high expectations, it's really become a buzz phrase in education, but you really have to dive deeper and think about how high expectations are defined. Take a minute, pause this video, go to the question in Google Classroom, answer that, and then once everyone has answered that question, respond to one of your classmates' posts. Now, John Hattie, who of course has done extensive research on all of the things that really affect student learning, he has found that having high expectations on the part of teachers for their students, that really has the single greatest impact on student achievement. So the question becomes, how do we communicate high expectations for all? Number one, we always need to emphasize in our classrooms that what we are studying is important. If teachers do not relay this message and students pick up that this is just something that doesn't really matter in the long term, then they're not going to do their best on that assignment. Number two, the teacher always has to convey positivity, that you can do it attitude. Every single student should have the feeling that they are able to succeed in that teacher's classroom. And then finally, the teacher has to convey the message that they're never going to give up on that student, that they're going to work through any issues, through any tough times in the curriculum, that they're going to be there to support the student. So the next thing I would like you to do is to click on the link in your Google Classroom so that you can access the video from the Research for Better Teaching site. If you've never been on the site, you are probably going to have to create an account so that you can access this. The video is just about a 3.5-minute video that shows what a teacher does in the transition time between classes. How is that teacher greeting their students? What are they talking about as the students come into the classroom? This really has a huge impact. And then once you've viewed the video, go ahead and answer the question in Google Classroom. How do you think you can better use the transition times to set high expectations? Now, the next thing we're going to look at are two terms. One, the standards, and two, the expectations. The standard is the level of performance that we want from students. The expectation is what we think or believe students can or will produce. So in the highest level of teaching, we are going to always have high standards and high expectations for our students. So take a few minutes. You have in your Google Classroom a document that you can fill in with a chart. And there are 4 different quadrants on this chart. And what we would like you to do is just think about if you were to visit a classroom that had these different characteristics in each of these quadrants, what would you see? What would you see in terms of calling on students? When students ask for help, what is the teacher going to respond with? What about the level of rigor of the work? How are mistakes handled in that particular classroom? What are the grading practices? What happens with retakes and redos on assessments and assignments? And if a student doesn't meet the expectations, what happens in that classroom? So go ahead and in your chart on Google Classroom, go ahead and write down a couple of characteristics, thinking about those earlier different ideas. What would you see in a high standard, low expectation classroom? What would you see in a high standard, high expectation classroom? Low standards, low expectations, and then low standards and high expectations. So the communication of standards, of course, is very significant. And I would like you to respond to the following question under your chart. In 3 to 5 sentences, explain how you incorporate personally high standards and high expectations in your own classroom. And maybe even talk about how you will in the future. Maybe this has really struck a chord with you and there's some things that you want to incorporate in your own classroom. Just to wrap this up, standards and expectations, some of the observable classroom behaviors, clearly established classroom routines. You have standards, your learning targets and criteria for success. Those are clearly communicated. The teacher sticks with students who are not successful. And feedback and corrective procedures are used. And from John Safier, I think really an important piece to take a look at and reflect upon. He says that given that perceptions can have this kind of powerful influence on behavior, we ask our readers to consider the possibility that all children have the capacity to do rigorous work to high standards and to act as if that were so, to suspend disbelief and invest energy in searching for ways to create the conditions in which this would become a reality for all students. It is our contention that if we behave as if we can reach every child and we continue to strive to create the conditions that are optimal for their learning, we will see more miracles than we could have imagined and see more students reach proficiency than ever before. We have to remember, beliefs drive behavior, behavior drives culture, and culture drives change. If every teacher in Plain Local has high standards and high expectations, there's definitely no stopping where we can go. The roots of what people will do are planted firmly in their beliefs about what they can do. So just remember, your expectations for your students, it is one of the most important keys to the success of your students.